Welcome everyone to Weekend Escapades. We are headed to Bullfrog Ghost Town. But before we start that adventure, we're going to stop by the Goldwell Open Air Museum. Don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on that notification bell for more like this. And in the description below, you'll notice we're now on Patreon. Click on it and check it out. Now between Bullfrog Ghost Town and Rhyolite Ghost Town, there's this abandoned set of buildings. There's about 3 or 4 in here, and some abandoned vehicles as well. So we thought we'd check these, homesteads out and see what we found inside. But check out this old truck. I thought this was amazing. I'm surprised it doesn't have more stickers and graffiti on it. But one thing I did notice is this truck still has air in the tires. I wish my tires would last that long. Now I'm sure a lot of people know more about vehicles than I do, so if you know what year this is, or you know what model this is, please let me know in the comments below. I noticed there's a bed spring that they're using in there for a seat. And if anybody knows what model this is, also let me know in the comments, because this doesn't have much left. I almost thought by the back window and the back end of this car that it looked like an Impala, but then something made me think that it looks a little bit like a Ford from certain angles. Now this building here, we're going to go ahead and check it out on the inside. But this building on the inside and on the outside looked a little bit more modern than the rest of the cabins in the area in the ghost town. And you'll see inside, there's another old bed spring. They're always hanging out in a ghost town. And the fireplace or the stove and the stovepipe is still in there. And it looked to me like this had those pre-constructed walls made out of cement and fine rock. And also some large stones. Now, they used to fabricate these walls to put these houses up. In this area, they were some of the first ones that they did that with. Now, I noticed when I was looking inside this dwelling here that this post right here, there's another one inside. So this had a fairly nice patio in the front of it. And part of it's inside the house, and the other one's still standing right there. I found that odd that that is still standing, and somebody hasn't knocked that over. What an amazing old building this is, or what's left of this building. Moving on to the Goldwell Open Air Museum. There's a nice little shack here that was original on property, where there's a volunteer in there that told us all about this location. They got an old miner and a penguin sculpture there. That's about 20 or so feet tall. And also this here actually had real people when they put this together and modeled it. And hey, who's that sitting on that couch? Sitting down on the job. So these plaster pieces had people inside of them until it dried. So they put this over the top, covered it in plaster, and as it dried, they took it off, covered it in fiberglass, and sealed it up. They thought these originally were only going to last about 2 years, and the artist was actually shocked that this was still around all these years. Now, this is one of the most famous sculptures on property, and it is called The Last Supper. This piece here is modeled similar to those others, except this one has an artist's palette that they're holding out here. So very interesting. They almost look spooky. I've seen some night photos of these, and it looks a little creepy. This right here, a little bit of artwork, metal artwork that takes after some of that Japanese paper art. And there's that giant woman. I thought this was a Lego sculpture, but it is actually made out of a cinder block style. As I went up there and touched it, and it is definitely blocks. Let's dive into Bullfrog Ghost Town. This is the Stosey Cabin. Now, the Stosey Cabin is one of the only cabins or residents that have a little bit remaining still standing. And behind the Stosey Cabin, you're going to see a line in the sand, let's say. And that is where the Bullfrog Railroad line went into town to help remove all of the ore and what they found here in Bullfrog. So we're going to go and we're going to walk straight down this railroad line. And on the right and left-hand side, there are still a couple of foundations from 2 homes, or the larger homes, that were here in Bullfrog. Now, I was asked what happened to all of this in this town. Like, for instance, the railroad ties, and what happened to the buildings, and why are they falling down? Well, what happened in these towns is when they shut down, this was a short-lived process. They thought it was going to be here, the gold was going to be here forever. And when it dried up, everybody took all of the buildings, dismantled them, moved some of the full buildings into Beatty, Nevada. And what they had taken apart was used to reconstruct buildings in other locations. Now, I was told by a local historian here in the area that the railroad ties and all of the steel were picked up and used because in 1942 they needed it for the war efforts. Now, these old foundations, although they're not very exciting to look at times, this was a 3-room house, and you can tell because of the walls that are going across to the foundation. But what's going to happen is with the rain and the wind and everything that happens in the desert, these things get covered up. And so we like to document what's left because before long, this will all be gone as it is really on the ground. Now, this is the old Bullfrog Jail, or what's left of it. Now, this jail was used for Rhyolite as well while Rhyolite was building their jail. And then when Bullfrog dried up, Rhyolite actually used this as an animal shelter. Take a look at what's left and all the amazing bars still in the window. And I'm going to talk a little bit of history about Bullfrog and what happened here. So Bullfrog originated because the entire town, a tent town of Amargosa City, which was located near the original Bullfrog mine, moved to the Bullfrog town site. In 1905, Rhyolite began to form, and soon there was a fierce competition between the two towns. And in May of 1905 was the peak of Bullfrog, short existence. Hard to believe that this was the county jail and built in 1905. Other business included a 3-story hotel and a lodging house, a general store, a bank, and an ice house, which we're going to show you here in just a few clips. Among others, a number of fatal gunfights did not help Bullfrog to keep its residents. Many left to live in Rhyolite, and by 1907, Bullfrog was nearly empty. Now, this is what's left of the sturdy walls of the ice house. This was a building that was about 30 feet wide and 60 feet long. Now, there are only 3 walls, or 3 buildings with walls standing. One was the cabin, the ice house, and the jail. Bullfrog's last status symbol burnt to the ground June 25, 1906. It was the local hotel. And the post office struggled to stay open during the next several years, but closed its doors for good in May 15th in 1909 before Bullfrog joined the growing ranks of Nye County's ghost towns. And as we always try to do is stop by the cemetery of the ghost town and pay our respects. We hope you enjoyed this adventure to Bullfrog Ghost Town and Goldwell Outdoor Museum. And until our next adventure, goodbye from Weekend Escapades.